that we can gain some insight into the factors that are needed.
Thank you very much. Good morning. BDC is the government's main investment arm, and it's also a development finance institution. It has a very long history, and I believe its footprints are in every sector of the economy, because traditionally its strategy has been very sector agnostic. We focus on all the sectors, including the tourism sector. And actually, if you look at almost all the pioneering tourism assets in this country, they have one way or the other some linkages with the Botswana Development Corporation. In its early years, it provided infrastructure to tourism companies. If you look at, for instance, tourism and hospitality, even where we are here, these are some of the infrastructure that has been provided by BDC. You look at the Cresta Maracanelo Group. It used to operate mainly in the hotels that were owned by BDC. If you go to all the tourism areas in the country, especially the key ones, you go to Chobe, there are BDC assets there. You go to Mashatu Nature Reserve, BDC has got its footprints over there, as well as in Mau.
Okay, great.
Thank you. Yeah.
And how much of, I guess this is also a question for Stanbic Bank as well, how much importance is sustainability put on the projects? When a project comes to you and they have their outline, how much emphasis is placed on sustainability?
Yeah. I think BDC is largely self-funding, which means we do raise own capital in order to own land to the promoters for the various projects. Sustainability becomes key in the sense that if you look at our funders, for instance, they expect to be paid back whatever we have borrowed from them. And also, if we invest in a project, our expectation is that it must yield some returns, it must create economic value, and we should be able to come out of those projects and reinvest in others so that we are able to empower citizens by divesting from our former projects. This means sustainability to us as a developmental organization is very important. One, like I said, from a return point of view, that we need to continue earning a return to be able to reinvest. Two, we want projects that can make an impact in the community. Like I said, we are not sector agnostic. Therefore, we go into other sectors such as, for instance, healthcare, because we want the communities to benefit from such projects. Other than that, we are also conscious of the environment, to say our projects should not harm the environment, because we want continuity, and the only way we can achieve it is to ensure that the environment is safe and we are able to operate in perpetuity.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Mr. Keseabetswe, can you tell me about Stanbic Bank's point of view? What are the success factors that you look for, and how much of a factor is sustainability?
All right. Thank you, Carmen. And I think we spent quite a lot of time practicing my last name. We omitted to do that for my first name, but I'm Onalenna Keseabetswe, just Ona for short. Okay. Just a bit about Stanbic. I think we've been in the Botswana market as a commercial bank for just over 30 years. Regionally and internationally, we are part of the Standard Bank group, so you'll notice our shield logo being unanimous across the region. From an investment banking perspective, there are two main things that we focus on. Firstly, and this is our primary business, we provide debt funding to businesses operating in the market. But secondly, which is an upcoming avenue that we're offering in our market, is offering advisory services around the raising of capital. So it's not only about Stanbic providing debt capital to operators in the market, but it's also about us advising how best to access capital that's there in the market, because we as a bank are not the only type of capital provider. So we can play a bit more of a role to operators in the market. From a critical success factor perspective, look, I think obviously from a business model perspective, there would be subject matter experts within tourism itself. But what I would just like to touch on a bit is what would look like success from a funder's perspective that we can sort of lean on when we do our assessment on our side. I think first and foremost, it's just in terms of long-term access to your primary assets that you are operating from as an operator. For us to provide you long-term debt capital, obviously we need that certainty to be able to know that, okay, this operator has maybe a 20-year concession. And this is essentially where government support can even come in for those operators that don't necessarily own their own assets, but to know that there's government support to give them the assets to be able to operate from. I think just going on to that, one of the success factors we look for is around proven sustainability of earnings. I think just allow me to take a moment to contextualize this. I think through the business cycle, there's different paths. There's the early stage, there's the growth stage, maturity, et cetera, et cetera. From a bank funding perspective, our main focus would be from the growth stage to the mature stage. That does not mean that greenfield projects are not able to raise funding, but it's just that our main focus, given how we are structured, we would focus more around the growth phase and the mature phase. And what typically gives the comfort for us to be able to support businesses in the growth phase and the mature phase is a proven sustainability of earnings. So if you look back to how far they've been operating, things like average bed nights, things like sustainability of earnings, things like their degree of operating leverage to make sure that not overly indebted with overheads, things like that certainly give us some comfort in terms of sustainability of earnings of the business. I have a few more points, but the one last one I'd like to touch on is in terms of diversity of offering to the market. I think oftentimes you will find that some projects are very similar in nature to others and operating right from the same region. And then the question might be, why have you supported this one but not been able to support the other? For us, it's quite imperative that there's clear differentiating factors that are targeting very specific parts of the market. The more that is more specific, the better it looks for us. That's not to say that where somebody has an offering that's very generic and diverse, we won't be able to support. I think there then the strength of the earnings is then an overarching factor more than anything. So just wanted to give a view on some of the success factors that we would look for, particularly from a funding perspective.
Oh, that's really interesting about the diversity, that you look at that impact on the market as a whole. Yeah. Let's cross over to Mr. Giachetty now. It's very interesting that RDC has a lot of properties outside of Botswana, so your portfolio is quite diverse. Could you explain a bit about the real estate industry and also what RDC does and how it can help investment in Botswana?
Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody, and especially the minister that is here to honor us this morning. For those of us that are here this morning, it's a pleasure to have the minister, because those that were here yesterday afternoon didn't have the pleasure to be heard by the minister. Thank you, Minister. Yeah, we are a little bit of an example of what an foreign investor could actually do in the country. We started many years ago, and I listed a property fund in 1992. 96 was a year of transformation. We started working with the pension funds. We never had the pleasure of working with BDC because we funded by ourselves with capital raised on the stock exchange. In fact, it was through the suggestion of the President Mogai, His Excellency the President, that we actually invested in hospitality. Mm-hmm. And the first project of ours was in Chobe Marina Lodge, okay, which is a lodge in the north. Yes. Clearly that made our interest in hospitality. And we grew the portfolio. At a certain point, Botswana was a little hub for us to invest outside of the country, mm-hmm, and we raised funding on the market here through bonds and equity. and we acquired a portfolio outside of the country. We invested in Madagascar, where we have a lodge, and in Joburg, in Rosebank, we did an hotel, which is the Radisson Red. So basically, we started investing from Botswana outside, and the catalyst to the fundraising was a large investment here in Gaborone, which is one of the hotels and mixed-use development. So what you really see is the strength of Botswana because of its political stability and the capital available on the market through the pension funds. We managed to then invest abroad. Now we have a portfolio which is, for Botswana, fairly large, of which 75% is outside of the country. So I believe that this is a way for the Botswana economy to actually diversify, because the benefit of our pension fund holders that have shares of our company will actually be felt in the next 30 years with portfolios outside of the country. So in terms of hospitality, they represent 13% of our portfolio. What has made really that sustainable for us is, I think, and things that people don't really say all the time, is one is trust empirical data. So look at the figures and not what so-called consultants tell you, because if you look at the market, by looking at empirical data which exist in the market, for example, in the hospitality, they'll tell you what the average room rates are achieved by the different products. And by doing that, you actually see what is really on the ground. Clearly, unless you have a product that is completely out of the market, then those are data that are real facts. So, it is important, because some of the hotel groups that invest in different locations, and typically Botswana, you'd have seen at the beginning of, they come here, they think, oh, the average room rates are very high, and in fact they are not very high. So one has to become sustainable, one has to look at hard facts. Okavango carries some very high average room rates, but the availability of land is not there. So government could possibly help in that, providing leases, providing the infrastructure for tourism to be investing in those spaces. Chobe, for example, is another area in Botswana which is quite endowed with the Chobe National Park, but there's a lot of properties already there. And if you look at the average room rates, there's a lot of competition. So again, it's not that I'm trying to protect where we are, but you can see where the markets are by looking at the statistics. And I think it's important to determine those areas that are new, pristine areas where there is potential for investment. So that renders a project sustainable. From a ESG point of view, clearly hospitality is a fantastic opportunity for the country. It employs, we've already heard it, the employment is very high. And the fact that we employ essentially citizens in all our properties, that is important, because it creates, every employment generated supports the large family structures. And you have cultural investment, because we invest a lot in supporting the cultural tours and cultural activities. So I'm taking an example. We started with some kids doing some shows on some traditional dance at Chobe Marina Lodge. Now those kids are now become teenagers, and they're even grown, and we provide them an opportunity to earn money over their lifetime. And they've been with us for 20 years. So those groups of cultural activities are integral part of the growth of our portfolio. So I think the effect of investment in tourism is even wider than other commercial investments.
That's true, and I love that you've invested in the youth, because as we know, Africa has the largest youth population in the world, and that shows a lot of foresight, doesn't it, to invest in these youngsters and foster them, and they can grow within your hotel and resort projects. So that brings us nicely on to Keletso, Bogatsu. From an operations side, you're at the helm of one of the premier mice places in Gaborone. Hold on, I've mispronounced that as well. Gaborone. So tell me about your perspective from an operations side of things.
Thank you, Carmen. And yes, you are so correct in saying that we do have such a unique product, and we are blessed to be able to facilitate the amount of conventions that come through here from an international point of view. So just to touch on the history of why collaboration and investment is so important, more especially in the tourism and hospitality industry. So Piedmont has been in Botswana since 1995. They're a South African-based company. They came in here and collaborated with BDC, who's the shareholder of the property that we are at the moment. So when Piedmont started as a management company in Botswana, the only facility that was available in the property was the Walmont, which is the main hotel. And that only included the two conference rooms, the Okovango and the Moremi. Piedmont then later on invested in the building of the Metcourt Inn and the casino as it stands today. Just to showcase the collaboration between the two shareholders, in this case being the BDC and Piedmont. BDC then built this structure that we are at the moment that is called the Gaborone International Convention Center. It was actually the first ICC in Botswana. We've obviously subsequently to that, Botswana has built a couple of other ICCs in various parts of the country. And I think in that it just showcased why it's so important for collaboration of the two big brands to take place, and you know, obviously it has contributed to the GDP growth or the tourism industry, and not just the growth of it from that point of view, but in a lot of aspects, you know, from an employment point of view, from just injecting into the tourism industry and giving other investors the opportunity to realize this relationship that actually has been going on for 28 years and still going strong till today. We are hoping, obviously, in doing more projects together. In later years, the two shareholders have actually acquired what we call the Mondio, which is 12 kilometers across the city. They've also both acquired a property in Francistown called the Metcourt Inn Hotel that has got 56 keys, and which also includes the Citibank Casino. So it is possible that two brands of this nature can collaborate to expand and give value to the tourism industry, as we are seeing with Piedmont and BDC.
That's great. So these new properties that you're talking about, are they going to be MICE properties or business hotels? What are we looking at in coming up in the future?
Obviously, our intention at the moment as Botswana and our focus is to create a MICE industry. And if there are going to be any plans of BDC and Piedmont taking this further, it will be to enhance what it is that we've already got. So I think that's the focus, not only for Piedmont and BDC, but I think the focus for the country, because once you mature that MICE industry, everything else becomes a ripple effect. And it just creates a whole new dimension in terms of employment and enhancing of the tourism status.
Yes, there seems to be a lot happening in the MICE sector across Botswana, indeed. So that is interesting. But I think one of the key themes, not only of this investment summit, but also in recent years across the industry, is collaboration, which you really touched on. How important is collaboration? Let's ask Kgosidiile. How important is collaboration, but not only with big brands? Can larger brands collaborate with smaller brands, like SMEs, for instance? Is there a place in the market for that?
Thank you very much. I think collaboration is key for us, I think from two dimensions. One, established brands have set standards in terms of the service that they render. That assures potential customers the comfort and the level of service that they want. Secondly, they have proven commitment to what they are doing. To us, that is what you call skin in the game. When you collaborate with larger brands, normally they've already met the requirements to demonstrate skin in the game. And therefore, you are assured of a partnership that is going to be durable. As I have indicated, with BDC, because we also have a developmental mandate, once we achieve a mature relationship with a mature brand, we seek to exit in order to fulfill some of the developmental obligations. It can be one, to broaden the private sector participation. Two, it can be issues of economic inclusion to ensure that we accommodate women investors, we accommodate youth investors, we accommodate citizens in general. So we see a lot of opportunities in terms of larger brands being able to collaborate with smaller brands through BDC's initiatives. We are also able to invest in terms of equity participations. That helps us to hold, I would say, shareholding on behalf of the smaller brands, so that when they are at the right level, they can take over the BDC stake.
Okay, and what about from a Stanbic Bank point of view? How is collaboration viewed, not only public-private, but from the private sector? Is this less risky from a Stanbic Bank point of view?
Thank you, Carmen. Thank you. So from our perspective, we view collaboration perhaps at a slightly different level from collaborating at the operation level. I think one of the things that's quite important from our perspective is being able to collaborate with perhaps funders as well that will have a pass-through to the sectors themselves. It's not necessarily always us looking to sort of provide capital directly and have bilateral, if I can call it that, in nature. I mean, we've worked quite closely with players that are industry experts. I think, as you can hear, Kgosidiile is talking very particularly about the sector. We as Stanbic are working with the likes of a BDC because we understand that they have that strong underlying knowledge of the sector. That for us is what collaboration is. If I extend it a bit further, is one of the things that we've done quite strongly is work hand in hand with the likes of the Botswana Stock Exchange in terms of accessing investor funds from the different pension funds. I think that is one emerging and strong source of collaboration that we can bring forth to players in the market to say, we as banks are not the only ones that can actually provide the funding directly to you, but we know other channels within which you can get funding. Just to sort of give a few examples, one of the things we're able to do is help entities raise funding in the debt capital markets. I think we predominantly know this as bonds. Another way we have is help entities raise money on the equity capital markets, which is through listings or rights issues. So collaboration, obviously, for us is at a slightly different level, but I think our participation in the market, whether it's direct or indirect, is just really the result of the collaboration we're able to do from a funding and investment perspective.
And you also act as a sort of financial matchmaker, so to speak.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. I think our dear friends at the Stock Exchange have actually put us to task to be able to do more and develop the capital markets of the country. And I think this is also quite beneficial for the investors because they now have increased assets where they can deploy their funding. So it's kind of like a win-win for everyone involved.
Great. Mr. Giachetty, what about your investors from outside of Botswana, from Croatia, South Africa, for instance? Do you think there's more potential down the track for your clients to reinvest here in Botswana?
Yeah, I think you're talking essentially partnerships, and call them collaboration. We've heard partnerships. I think in the sector, it's very wide. It starts with partners in the different countries. So we take that seriously, and we've always had partners in Botswana. We've had partners entering new ventures in South Africa, in Croatia, Madagascar. We've just come into Zambia with a product which is an hotel of 77 rooms on the Victoria Falls. with a partner, a local partner that knows the market. So that's the first. And they are interested in investing with us than in the country. So they've said to us, look, if you have opportunities, this partnership works well in these countries, why don't we do something together in Botswana or in other jurisdictions? So that is a first level of partnership. Clearly the partnership with the banks, having worked with Standard Bank here, it's easier to work with Standard Bank in South Africa, the largest funder of our portfolio in South Africa. So that is from a financing point of view that, or they are raising bonds with us. So we, it's always like that. As you grow and you are in more jurisdiction, you take advantage of those partnership with your funders, and that is one of the things that we are doing. So that is the partnership from that point of view. The partnership with the brands, and we're talking about tourism, so I'm coming back to, we work with Marriott, we work with Radisson, we work with sales and marketing of companies that are maybe based outside of the country, but that have got the reach to clients that are going to come to Botswana. So all of that is part of the ecosystem that is very, very important. So I think that the partnerships are very wide in all sectors, from incipients to the running of the projects. And those make for an interesting set of dynamics within the portfolio that we run.
Well, we'll be wrapping up soon, but I'm interested in the land perspective. You were saying investment in some parts of Chobe, for instance, is quite saturated. How does it work in terms of acquiring land or knowing what land is available?
Well, I guess we were very lucky in Chobe at the time. There was a tender for a piece of land where we tendered for, and we won that tender. It's a lot more complicated later on. I must say that is one place where we think the government of Botswana needs to be a little more clear on especially with the concessions in the Okavango and places like that. We've been tendering to get some concessions, and we've never really managed. Now we're looking at some acquisitions, but it's always fairly complicated. Even in joint venture, it is complicated. So I think that's an area where I would suggest that there should be some more clarity on the leases, on the type of concession, and giving opportunities. And in certain way, I would like to believe that having proven in the country that we've invested billions in the country, that there should be a recognition of the effort that one does in a country, and then have some sort of consideration for that.
Yes.
So that's a little hint to to our host country, and I think it's an important one. Because
conversation for later.
Conversation for later. But I must say, in other countries where we operate, there is this kind of conversation, and it happens. So we are competing for capital. The capital can go somewhere else, and that is what is happening. We are investing in countries where within very little time we are able to grow our portfolio, because there is this kind of collaboration, again, partnership with the authorities, saying, come and invest here, and we will facilitate, because we see that you've already invested quite a lot. So I think at the end of the day, capital can flow from one place to another, and it's important that we become competitive.
Yes, and I think this conference seeks to open those doors,
Correct.
For instance. And I know that in the next session, where a lot of hopeful entrepreneurs will be pitching to the audiences for funding and for partnerships, there's a lot of hotels vying for money. So what is your advice as industry stalwarts? What's your best advice for these people who are looking to get a foot in the door in the industry? We'll just go down the line. So, Mr. Giachetty.
As I said before, empirical data. Get the figures right, and do your analysis of the market. Or your project is totally out of the market and it's an innovation or whatever, then you have to take a more riskier approach. But get figures, because too many people have burned their fingers by not having the right finger. You don't have a problem in Botswana because there's an incredible stability, economic stability, political stability. In other countries where we operate, that has not been the case. I'm talking about one of the places where we invested a long time ago, and with the ups and downs from a political point of view, it's been quite a challenge because tourism immediately stops coming to a country where there are elections that are creating problems and things like that. So I'm talking about Madagascar, where the tourism really dropped quite a lot during all these years of uncertainty. So I think those political stability is important, but fortunately we're endowed with political stability and economic stability in this country.
Great. Kgosidiile, what is your advice for these hopefuls? What's the best way to get a foot in this door?
I think for BDC, we are a risk taker. We provide patient capital. We look at early stage companies. And the reason we do that is because we are looking for broader impact, not just financial viability. Nowadays, there are many forms of funding that one can access, provided one fulfills certain requirements. For instance, a demonstration that you are going to create a green environment that comes at a cheaper cost. I will advise those who are seeking funding to seriously, just from the beginning, to try and make their projects environmentally compliant, because that enhances the chances of getting cheaper funding. Secondly, I think we want projects that are viable. We don't want projects that we become patient with only for them to collapse along the way. That is why I had earlier on emphasized the need for skin in the game. That as they bring forward their proposals, they need to demonstrate commitment to those projects as well, because you cannot partner with someone who lacks commitment. That is very key for us. And also, I mean, we are operating in an environment that has got its own laws that need to be adhered to. Our expectation is that the projects that come forward, and for them to be successful, in all respects, they must demonstrate adherence to the laws of the country. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Keletso, Bogatsu, you're a hotelier, someone with so much experience in the hospitality industry. What is your best advice for these young entrepreneurs coming up?
Passion, passion, and more passion. Without passion in this industry, Carmen, you are an absolute non-starter. You deal with a lot of different aspects from a human relations, especially point of view. And if you don't have the passion to deal with people on a daily basis, and I'm talking a variety of people, I'm talking from all over the world. If you cannot even, if you speak to yourself and you say, can I sit with different people in a room on a daily basis? And the answer is no. It's not even an non-starter. I know a lot of people take our industry for granted and think, oh, it's just hotels, you just go in it and you run it. It's not as simple as that. It really is not as simple as that. It takes a lot of hard work, especially when you're starting up a new project. There's no sleeping. The relaxation is the other way around. When a facility is already operating, you probably at the most get like 10 hours leisure, and I'm talking on average throughout the week. Once you start operating or once you start developing a property, we're talking about you working at least 18 hours of the day and only resting a couple of those hours. It's a lot of hard work, and I think for anybody who wants to start in the industry, they need to realize that there's absolutely no sleeping in this industry when you're starting in it.
Invest in coffee.
Yeah.
Okay, I love that. I love the passion that's needed because, yes, it's a very key, I think.
Yeah.
And Ona from Stanbic Bank, what's your best advice?
Yeah, no, thanks, And I think, being the last speaker, I tend to be at risk of all the points having been covered. But firstly, I'd just like to echo Guido's words around empirical data and just being very close to your numbers and understanding what is driving each point at each period, why this happened, why that happened, and being able to demonstrate that to the person that you are asking to invest in your business. I think far too often you'll find, especially with early success businesses, where somebody just knows they're making money, but they're not quite familiar with what's driving that business. I think as you move on to the next level and you're looking for people to come into the business, just be very particular and precise about the empirical data. That's actually what really even works for us from a financing perspective. The closer you are, the more empirical the data you're showing is, the better it is for us. And then the second point I'd just like to overlay is be very targeted and calculated about your growth ambitions. I think there's a tendency at times to be overly optimistic around exponential growth. Whilst that is good from a drive perspective, I think at times it sounds like pie in the sky to investors. So there should be a clear path if you're talking about growth, from where you are to where you're going, and how that particular investor can help you get there and what's in it for them to get there. So just being calculated and targeted about growth ambitions, I think, would go a long way for them. Thank you, Carmen.
Okay, well, thank you so much. We've heard some very key advice there. Passion, be realistic, but most importantly, know your numbers. So I really appreciate this conversation. Thank you very much, and hopefully this has offered some good advice for those of you out there. Thank you.
Thank you.